Hello and welcome to the LBN podcast. Um,
Hello.
my my name is Yun and I'm a director of LBN.
My name is
Andrew.
Andrew Hazard. I'm also a director of LBN and the East Coast representative.
hmm
And my name is Richard Galime, the owner of DF Music Enterprise and Overture.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Go ahead, Andrew.
All right. So first off, um, how did you get where you are? Like, what's your story?
Oh man, I mean, we can go pretty far back with that. I come from a family of musicians, a couple generations, various different things where they've been on the road. They played with lots of other different groups, you know, jazz and stuff in the 50s and 60s, and then rock. And my father had a band and he was on the radio and whatnot. So just kind of music history in my family. Um, that sent me off to music school. Originally, I started as a music education major, and I do love education, but I think music education is a very specific thing. And I like to bring that up a lot because I didn't not do music education because I didn't want to teach. It's just as a degree, that's a whole different approach. You're going into teaching in a school, it's a very specific like band program thing. It's not private teaching, it's not your own lesson classes. It's not that I don't want to teach. I love teaching and helping. Um, but I just felt like that music education path wasn't really for me. And I found myself in a music business program. And my school, the Crane School of Music at SUNY Potsdam, um, they were just starting to sort of build their music business program. And it wasn't a music business program centered around like the music industry, rock, hip hop, recording studios, things like that. It was actually a music business program focused on retail. So, thinking about music stores, music products, packaged goods, things like that. So it's a much different approach to a music business degree. And I just got really lucky. I was blessed. There was an opening at a company called Danzer Incorporated, which was the importer for Dennis Wick. And I got involved in Dennis Wick being a brass player, and kind of the pieces fell in place from there. So I went from Dennis Wick to working with Con Selmer, which is, Bach, King, Holton, lots of those US legacy brands. And then from Con Selmer, I ended up purchasing DF Music from the previous owner, which, as a side note, he also worked at Danzer for Dennis Wick. He saw an opportunity at that time and started DF Music focused solely on Dennis Wick as a product group and started kind of growing his store from there. Did a lot of like conventions, things like that. But he was really kind of in retirement, half retirement. And he and I were pretty good friends, colleagues, and kind of always talked about, hey, if the opportunity is right, would you ever want to take over DF Music? And the opportunity was right. In 2016, we started talking about it. In 2017, I became the owner. I think that's as quick as I can give that story.
Yeah, that sounds really cool, honestly. Do you ever sort of think back on what would have happened if you pursued music education?
Yeah, I do all the time. I work a lot with music educators, and a lot of my friends are music educators. Some of my family members are music educators, band directors in schools and different various positions. I think for me, I would have been less fulfilled. Um, I really enjoy products, and I really enjoy working with someone and finding that right fit. That's why we
Mm,
do a lot of what we do with the mouthpiece trials and the instrument stuff that we do. And it's really enjoyable to get someone started on music with those music products. It's a really big deal to have access to musical instruments. I was lucky. I was blessed with
Yeah.
this musical family. We had instruments everywhere. Growing up, I could pick up a cornet, a trumpet, a keyboard. We had a drum set in our basement, a full rehearsal hall with, a PA, guitars, basses, you name it, we kind of had it in the house. So that access to musical instruments and music products is a key part of what I love doing. And my father also was a trumpet mouthpiece, like fanatic, and had hundreds of trumpet mouthpieces. So I really got into learning all about them. So I've always found it fascinating. And that also kind of helps me with another passion of mine, which is sort of mechanics and engineering. So working with instruments, working with products, specs, understanding those specs, how they work with acoustics, it all comes together. And I get so much more fulfillment out of that. And I feel like if I were in music education, I wouldn't have that same path. And it takes a special talent to do that. And even today, I can still recognize, you know what? I wouldn't have made the best band director. I had
Mm,
great band directors in school. They were fantastic. And I really felt like that was an important distinction. Understanding that when you're going to go into music education, you're an educator first and a musician kind of second,
got
in a
you.
sort of a way. And I think a lot of people, even when I was going to school, didn't realize that. They were saying like, well, I went into music education because I love music and I want to keep playing. And I'm like, well, then you're kind of in the wrong career path, because you're going to be a teacher. And it's really important to understand that if you're going to be a teacher, that's your dedication. And I appreciate that from all band directors and music educators everywhere. And that's also why I do what I do, to hopefully make their job easier and them not have to worry about who's getting an instrument from where and what product they're using. And how does a band director who is a percussionist or woodwind player figure out what mouthpieces to use for brass, and vice versa? So I think band directors really rely a lot on those specialists at music stores, to really help that out. So I really feel like I'm still part of that puzzle piece of music education,
Definitely.
even though I'm not a music educator.
Yeah, I think the main point I've seen through like my time as a trombonist is that music itself isn't only about the player. Like there's so much more. Like first of all, like the teacher, the person like telling you to emphasize like which phrases to go on to. But there's also like another side to like the instrument, the people who made that instrument. And recently, I've been in a college marching band, and I've actually been a part of sort of a group of people that when the marching band ends up playing, we supply a bunch of water around to support them and make sure that they have a space and
Hmm.
like set up basically the stage for everything. So there's like so much that goes around and so many like key rules to play that it's not only about like just sitting down and playing. Like anyone can do that, but in order to create like truly good music, there's so much like roles that have to be filled, I guess.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, that's
absolutely.
yeah, that's kind of like with me. I thought about music education, but because like I get joy out of helping people, but like you were saying, I don't see myself being per se a good music educator. So and
Yeah,
it's
an
one of those things like when
educator in the traditional sense. So I mean, we're
yeah
all educating on music. Like that's what all of these groups are about. That's what my store is about too. But
yeah
yeah, and I like to bring that. I like to clarify that. Like when we say music educator, what we're really talking about is like our school band directors and our private lesson
yeah
teachers. So
yeah, and that's something I really saw when I got to college is like of course I'm going to school hopefully to be a doctor, and
nice.
just being involved in like the college marching band, jazz band, studio jazz band, symphony band, and all that. It's you don't have to be an educator or like a symphony performer to still have the joy of music. Like there's so many different tracks you can take, and yeah, I mean it's there's just so much more. But I feel like everybody kind of just leans on like educator. But I mean, like with you, you know, like DF Music, I mean, there's just so much more you can do. And you're in running like DF Music with all your partnerships, you're actually going, like, your outreach is greater than if you would have been, say, like a high school band director.
For what I'm doing, absolutely. You're right. The outreach is greater there. I mean, I'm not molding the young musicians who are going to carry on playing music in the future, like an educator or a band director gets to do. But yeah, it's a different outreach. It totally is. And you know, I like that statement that you guys said a minute ago that there's more to music than just the player. Uh, it's a whole world, and there's so much going on in it. So, and you can participate in it in so many levels. You don't have to go to music school to continue playing music, and that's another beautiful thing about starting musicians. It's a lifelong opportunity to be involved in a group social setting that, as we get older, are harder and harder to be involved with.
Mhm.
When you're in school, it's easy. You're around all your peers. Where do you go from there? And music is sort of that thing where, sports is amazing, and I love athletics, and I do a lot in athletics myself too. But the older I'm getting, the harder it is to keep those going. Where I played in community bands where I was playing next to 90-year-old clarinet players who were perfectly healthy enough to play clarinet, and you could learn so much from them because they had been playing in so many different uh, periods of music, and it's hard to get that same thing in a lot of other activities. And I think arts in particular is one of those that is a lifelong thing. You can just keep doing it forever.
Definitely. Let's go on to actually talk about DF Music and Overture, along with the partnership with Dennis Wick.
Sure. Um, so DF Music's my store. That's like my web store. I have dfmusic inc.com, and then I've got a lot of direct business. So I work with schools, and I work with Salvation Army bands. There's hundreds of Salvation Army bands all across the US, and we work with them very closely. And then we have an instrument brand we work with called John Packer. John Packer makes these amazing student instruments, and they're priced relatively inexpensive comparatively to the instruments that you find often in rental programs. And we
Mhm.
wanted a way to bring access to those instruments to newcomers, beginners who maybe were hesitant to commit, thought renting was the only option, but renting's expensive. So we created the Overture program. And Overture basically gives you the opportunity to buy an instrument in that first year, a solid, good beginner instrument for like under $400. But within that first year, we've got these policies set up where you can return it, we'll buy it back. And without getting into it too much, basically for that first year, you're not really on the hook for the whole cost of the instrument. So it
Yeah.
gives you that freedom. And we've been growing the Overture program now for the last couple of years. The first couple of years were tough. It was during the pandemic, but now we're getting rolling, and we're seeing a lot more sales come through for Overture. And I have had zero complaints. Everyone's just loves the instruments, loves the program, and it's about ownership too. You own the instrument. I mean, that's a big deal for a student to understand. Like, I'm committing to this program, I own it. This isn't just well, we'll try this out for a month, rent this instrument, and they don't really commit that way. But when you own your instrument, it can be really exciting. Like, this is your trombone, this is your clarinet, flute, trumpet, whatever it may be. There's that really helps someone stick with music because there is a learning curve, and some of the instruments, the learning curve is longer. And you got to get through that learning curve so you can get beyond the basics and start making that music and start really feeling the that joy you get when you make the music. um, that's a big return on your investment, but it takes a little while with music.
I
it's not
think
immediate.
not only was it like the learning curve for me because I ended up actually buying a used bass trombone off of someone and ended up owning my own bass trombone instead of borrowing the school one. But it's like also like you have so much joy of playing it, and sort of like my trombone's like it's been places, you know? Like I
Yeah.
treat it as a um like it's its own thing, but also like you end up having a sense of like actually taking care of that instrument as well. We went
Hmm.
sort of into this in like the first episode, but there's some school instruments like students, they sometimes don't give it like any maintenance at all, and it ends up
Right.
becoming super dirty and stuff like that. But once you own like your own, it becomes a whole nother thing. Like you're like, oh, every month I should wash this in order to preserve it, and you end up learning so much more skills involved with like not only like um instrument playing but also like instrument maintenance.
Hmm.
And also I think we do have a YouTube video in our like on our LBN YouTube account going over like a review over one of the John Packer trombones, and it actually is a pretty good review.
Yeah, no, I watched the review, guys, from you guys doing it, and of course I appreciate it. It was a great review, and I think it also details the Overture program a bit more, where you can like go to the website overturefirst.com, and you can check it out. And speaking of the maintenance stuff too, on our site we did a bunch of videos with a local repair tech here that we use a lot, uh, Hofer Brass, and he's fantastic, and he detailed a lot of like sort of basics, and that's something you can get right on the Overture First website is, you know, how do you put a mouthpiece in? How do you put together a clarinet? Things like that, which are really helpful for beginners. So, that comes with ownership, and hopefully in time we'll have more and more content where it's this is how you can wash out your instrument at home for a brass player, or this is standard maintenance you might want to do on a saxophone or clarinet because it's got pads and those need to seal correctly. And there's a lot that goes into that. And also through that, you end up learning your instrument more too. I mean, if you understand how your pads are working and why they need to seal and what that does to the sound of the instrument, you'll also approach the instrument different and be able to play it better. So I think ownership it's a big part of music, and I want that to be available to everyone. And overturefirst.com gives access to a lot of people that may otherwise not have that. I mean, $50 a month is not inexpensive, and that's pretty much standard for rentals these days, and that adds up fast. So there's a lot of people that even with renting, it's becoming cost prohibitive. So
Yeah, because I know, like personally for me, so I live like went to high school like just south of Nashville, and of course there's like plenty of music shops and stuff, but I mean like it was expensive. They would one of my buddies, he a trombone player, he was on a rent to own, and that I mean they actually couldn't afford it. It was like $200 a month
right.
for rent to own, and he ended up having to take his instrument back at the end of the year. And it's one of those things where, because I know like what y'all are hitting at with the when you own your instrument, like you really like you respect the instrument more.
Hmm.
um when I initially started on tuba. Thought tuba was boring, which it's not. It's just boring in sixth grade.
Right.
But I moved over to trombone, and got my first trombone, and it's just like your music world changes. You have like a completely different look on things. You approach the horn more professionally. um and I know with like school instruments and stuff, people they'll like pass their horn around, and like let like a flute player play it, where like when you have your own instrument you're like, no, you
Yep.
don't know what you're doing exactly.
Hmm.
you know because once you start moving into like the more advanced like professional instruments, I mean they're expensive.
Yeah.
So just having the availability of being able to get an instrument at like such a low cost with Overture, I mean it's great. I mean I wish I had that opportunity, because like for us with my high school marching band, we had to march our band director called them like pea shooters.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and just, like they would break
Yep.
from horn pops and stuff. And it would just have been so nice to have that opportunity to have a cheap instrument. And I mean, John Packer, they're super nice. I've wanted one.
Yeah. John Packer's great. And that's a important discussion with Overture, is that it's only with John Packer instruments. Like, whereas if you're renting, you can never be sure exactly what instrument brand you're going to get. Uh, we specialize in these brands because we believe in them. That's why we specialize in John Packer. We specialize in Dennis Wick. We specialize in Smith Watkins Brass. They're quality brands that are, in my opinion, doing the right things and focusing on, I think, creating the best instruments they can in those price brackets. And that's why this works so well with Overture. They're not overpricing those student instruments so they fit into the rental market. They're pricing the instrument because they need affordable instrument. And part of that is because on the rest of the world, renting is not a thing. You don't rent an instrument in England. You don't rent an instrument in France. You don't rent an instrument in Japan. You have to buy it. So they need access to good, affordable instruments. So what we did was say, well, why can't we bring that access to, the market here? We're in Chicago. There's a lot of low income students, lack of credit, because they're, recently come over immigrants. So they just don't have the credit ratings. And we saw this complete lack of access. And when I say we, it was my wife as well, and she's a musician. She works actually for Dennis Wick. And we just saw this lack of access, and we said there has to be a way that we can help them through DF Music. We don't want to do rentals because we know that model. We know it's overpriced. We know there's a lot of tricky things going on in that rental market. So we thought up of Overture, and that's really what it's about: accessibility, affordability, just giving the people the opportunity to get involved in music. Because with Overture also, it's not just about school band. It's anyone can work with Overture. I've had, adults getting into it that are like, oh, this is a great way for me to, get a trombone and see if I like it and start playing again. So it works really well. And then that's also why we specialize in Dennis Wick. Dennis Wick is kind of the same vein in how they approach what they're doing with their products. They make great products, but at an affordable price. You're almost getting a custom style mouthpiece. It's all the ingenuity,
Yeah, definitely.
but it's only a $75 trombone mouthpiece, or a $90 trombone
Mhm.
mouthpiece, as opposed to going
See,
with a custom maker. So
yeah, because I personally I have two Dennis Wick mouthpieces. I have a 0 AL for bass, and then I have the three AL for my tenor, and I also
mhm.
use Dennis Wick mutes. And
Yep.
it's, I mean, you cannot go wrong with Dennis Wick.
Yeah, I think Dennis Wick's fantastic. I mean, it's where I started out in music, right? I started working with Dennis Wick, and I was their brand manager, and I love their products. Again, I find myself only working with product groups that I respect and like. Um, and oftentimes I don't think that's always the case for a lot of people, especially in retail. They're just looking at what's big in the market right now. How do I expand my market share? And you can see when you go on my site, it's just those three brands. And it's not that I don't think there's other good stuff out there, but I feel like Dennis Wick is doing the right things with their mouthpieces, with their mutes. They're innovating. They're constantly pushing the boundaries. The artist group that they have includes some great artists and some great programs, and that's exactly why I believe Dennis Wick started working with you guys, because they recognize that LBN is, again, aligned with the idea of inclusivity for musicians everywhere, and making it accessible within today's way of communication. So I think Dennis Wick looked at what you guys were doing and said, we'd love to partner up with you guys. We know you're young and you're new, but this is something that can grow, and they love supporting things like that. And I think their artist group and who they support shows that as well. And that's why I like to support their product group as much as I can. That's why we do trials with their stuff so that people can try it out. Because again, where do you get mouthpieces these days to try out? You go into a store and they've got the same 5 mouthpieces. So
Yep,
So I
definitely,
actually
especially
wanted
the
to
local.
start talking about what you said with your partnerships and what you like. Your partnerships are mainly based on like your values and what you choose. And I think
mhm.
that's like really important because in general, like I think you pointed this out already, but like music in business is, I think, in my opinion, more business than actual like music, right? Um,
It can be.
it can be, and sometimes I feel like that is true. Like I see the absurd market prices for my bass trombone mute, and I start crying.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's like a really good and important value to have is to like sort of this is why like LBN exists, right? To put like to give more opportunities to low brass players in terms of like that music and focus exclusively like on the music aspect. Um,
Right.
so yeah, I think this ties into like our next question on like why do you sort of do what you do right now?
Yeah, I think this whole discussion, I mean, you can listen back to it and there's a lot of already why I'm doing it. I mean, the bottom line is I'm a musician who loves music. I happen to enjoy working with gear, and then I want to bring those opportunities to everyone in a fair way. Uh, I work with Chris Bill, and he and I are pretty good friends. And one of the things we talk a lot about is, it's okay to make money. Like I have to have a career, right? Like I have to have a music store that can support itself and me and my family. But how do you do that in a fair way? How do you bring that to people and utilize this music store to bring those opportunities to people so that it's not just, yeah, here's a mute for $250. If you can get it, great. If you can't, whatever, the next person will. Same with musical instruments, especially with that Overture First program. I mean, there's so much money being poured into the whole rental machine and all that stuff. And you just see it from the manufacturing side where I've been, and you're like, oh my God, there has to be a better way to do this. And you just start to feel compelled to do it because for me, I love music. It's sort of music first, business second, which, sometimes isn't the best business approach. But if I can help bring those products to market in a better way that helps the proliferation of music and music education so that we all have more music opportunity, I think at the end of the day, that's going to be better for just music everywhere, for music listeners, for music players, for hobbyists, for professionals. It's just a better way to do business. It's a better way to approach what you're doing. If you're approaching it from the business standpoint, you lose out on that other aspect, and any idea of community that you have is well overshadowed by everything else you're doing. And you might be able to sort of make it look like you're trying to form a community, but at the end of the day, everyone can see through that. And it's like, yeah, you're just trying to get the money. And like I said, it's not that I'm not trying to have a successful business, but there are healthy ways to do that. There's healthy ways to sell products. There's healthy ways to work with people and employ people. And while I'm not big enough yet to have some full-time employees, it would be amazing at some point, to actually work with people and start supporting, you know, others' careers in music and getting them started. There's just so much opportunity there to help, to educate, uh, to bring things to market. So I just have that passion for music and I have that passion for helping. And this is the way I can do it. This is the way I can educate. this is the way I can help. So I think and I hope that comes out in my approach to how I handle DF Music and Overture first. So I think that sums up everything I was saying earlier.
I really think that's sort of a good approach. And so I think so with LBN, we have our own sort of role that we end up playing. Instead of sort of selling music, we try and provide lessons. We give like an app, we do research and all
Right.
these other stuff. And we're sort of like the middleman, I guess, between like your side of it and the player's side of it, and teach them how to play this new instrument that they got, teach them how to clean this new instrument that they got, like show where the dirtiest spots are and stuff like that. Andrew, you have anything else like you want to put in with LBN?
Kind of like you were saying, you know, our initially like our main goal was to just give students a opportunity to have lessons for free. You know, there's several of us on there who have had lessons from, you know, college professors and whatnot. And just the ability for us to take what we've learned and share it with a younger student. I mean, obviously, like down the road, they'll probably want to move up to like a college professor, especially as they get up in high school or whatnot. But just, you know, like as they're learning, I mean, like it's perfect. And, you know, I know the app, it's in the Google store, Google Play Store right now. I don't think it's at iOS yet. But, you know, we're gonna have there's, you know, like we're doing like a instrument wordle, like a music wordle, just to help your music vocabulary and
Yeah,
whatnot.
it's such a fantastic idea. When LBM was telling me about that, I was like, oh, that's great. That's going to be wonderful.
It's like some trombones don't know what pianissimo means. All they can speak is in forte.
I'm sure that's not the case for Andrew.
Hopefully not.
No, when I was first learning how to play, I was definitely a hero.
Yeah. But yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off, Andrew. It's just, yeah,
I know
the
it's fine.
music Wordle is such a cool thing, and the app that you guys are developing, it just sounds fantastic. So
Yeah.
I noticed you mentioned the Midwest Clinic earlier, while we were talking. Did you want to go into detail about that for any of the listeners?
oh, well, the Midwest Clinic is a very, very large convention that happens here in Chicago, where I am. Um, it started out a long time ago as a way to uh, showcase and introduce new sheet music for band and orchestra, and it still has a lot of its roots in that. But obviously, it's grown to this huge music educator hub. It's a huge festival. I think it's like, you know, probably over 20,000 people show up every year. And this year we're going to represent Dennis Wick, actually. So I'm actually helping Dennis Wick represent their booth in the US at Midwest. So I'm bringing all the Dennis Wick product I have, and then the Dennis Wick team will be there. I think Stephen Wick will be there. Mary Galime, the director of North American marketing, will be there. A couple other different artist reps, like, so it's kind of a chance to meet some of the people that are involved in these different product groups. And then also, oh my God, the amazing performances that happen at Midwest are incredible. I don't always have the time to see them because I'm always manning a booth, but there's some really amazing music from, you know, all levels of groups from all over the world at the Midwest Clinic. So if anyone ever has a chance to go, it's a great opportunity to check out what's happening in specifically that band and orchestra side of the world. So it's a pretty amazing opportunity to be involved, and I'm happy to be involved because I haven't been able to go the last few years due to pandemic stuff and other things going on. So it's my first time back in a while.
Yeah.
Definitely.
let's actually, in the end, start talking about our partnership with Dennis Wick. And first, I just wanted to talk about the LBN 10 code. So I think when people are buying instruments and they use a promo code LBN10, they get what percentage off again?
10%.
Yeah. So like
Yeah, it's 10% off. It's not quite site wide because I can't offer that discount code on Smith Watkins, and that has to do with how we have to import those in the British pound and whatnot. So I never know what my pricing is on those. But like for all John Packer and all Dennis Wick products, you get 10% off. And then we just have a standard, free shipping above $50. So pretty much like 95% of the products on our site ship free. Uh, and it's just our way to help out, the LBN community and say like, hey,
mhm.
you know, again, how can we help with more accessibility, and helping with 10% off is something that we can offer. Here's 10% off. We'll help you
I
out in any way we can.
yeah. I think the way LBN actually first got its big boost in the startup was actually through you guys and what you're doing in DF Music. I think it's extremely powerful that there are like some companies out there
Hmm.
whose only goal really is the accessibility, it is the music, and they want like to achieve that, and they find potential in nonprofits like ours that try and get like so much more accessibility and bringing in like new ideas, I guess, into this whole aspect of low brass. And I think that was really powerful.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And yeah, I felt the same way, you know.
Yeah,
And again, it's what we talked about earlier, like all these different moving parts and how we all play those different, and you said it, the different roles we all have. There are different roles, and how we utilize those roles can help make or break, that next generation of musicians. So I think that's an important part, is again supporting, people like yourself.
definitely. I
So
think,
and LBN.
do you
So
see a particular like future in your company or our company or any of the companies that we talked about? Like whether we achieve our goal or something or other like that.
I think it's already happening. Um, the groups I work with, my product groups, John Packer, Smith Watkins, Dennis Wick. The groups I work with in terms of what you guys are doing, so like LBN or the Matonis Productions or individual artists like Chris Bill, um, you know, I think they're already showing the impact they're having. I think they've already taken a look at how we communicate, how we're using social media, how we're using the internet to connect, and we're using those platforms as a way to enhance music as opposed to focus and silo music. Where everything else is all about focusing and siloing and separation, I feel like the groups that I'm working with are using these platforms to bring music to a larger audience and to be inclusive and have accessibility. So I think it's already happening. I think it's happening because I can see Overture working well. I think it's happening because LBN is going to be hosting a festival. Uh, when's your festival that you're hosting?
It is July 1 to 3, 2023.
There you go. And that was
Yeah,
not, and that wasn't even a shameless plug.
it is. I'm
I,
kidding.
I mean, it is for you, but not for me. I mean, you guys are hosting this festival, and already, so like, you're what, 2 years into this group, and you're already able to host a festival that's already getting great response and artists working with it because they can recognize what you're doing as good for the music community. So you can see in these groups that LBN's working with, that DF Music's working with, that Dennis Wick and John Packer are working with, and you can already see the difference they're making as opposed to the old school model, which is out there just kind of fuddling along, doing its thing. Um, it's just not as effective where this is. And it's because our goal is music and music community. And then we're using, we're finding a way to create our career in the community as opposed to I'm gonna, sell a bunch of this stuff so I can make money off of this community. We're getting involved in the community and find a way to be involved in the music community to create a career, a lifelong goal for ourselves, for those product groups, for our festivals, for everything that's involved. And I think it's great. And that's what I continue to look forward to. And as it grows even more. So
Yeah.
I
So,
does
sorry.
that sort of answer, do I see a future in it?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think
So,
what you said about like the festival, we're trying out this new thing. And initially it wasn't like that. We were actually thinking of just renting out like some sort of concert hall in order to do it
mhm,
like physically. And when we were like confined to the limitations of what's currently being done, we ended up saying like this isn't gonna work. Like this is way too early on. Nobody knows us. We're gonna need to find a different way, and we end up switching and forming our own sort of ideas about this situation. And
mhm.
we ended up creating like this LBN festival where not only is it like confined to the limitations of a physical space because it's technically all virtual, and
Yeah.
now we're getting like everyone like around the world, like internationally, and we're seeing so many renowned like artists coming in, ensembles coming in, even
Right.
like yeah, I think
So don't sell yourself short. I mean, don't say nobody knows who we are because clearly within a very short period of time, you were able to get all of those people involved because they all quickly found out exactly who you were, and
exactly.
by who you were, I don't mean what, oh, I know who LBN network is. That's that low brass network that they work on. What I mean by who you were, they found out what it meant that you were trying to accomplish. They
Our
found out what
goals.
your goal and purpose was, and they immediately wanted to get involved. And that's what happened with me. I mean, I think it was like 1 week of, from LBN contacting me to going, well, of course I want to work with you guys. You're doing you're doing the things that we all want to accomplish. So yeah, it works
Yeah,
great. So I think you guys are well known. I think you have your place already in the community, and it's just going to keep growing.
hopefully our like after this first festival we'll end up seeing like our innovations like spread across to others, um because I think what we're doing here is like a fairly like new thing. This is honestly the first like festival that's like international that I've heard of. I don't know if it's been done before, and I think we should have some more things like these in order for low brass players to really like truly understand what they can do with that new instrument that they just
Right.
bought from Overture.
Well,
Just
perfect,
kidding.
perfect. There it is.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's all in context. Is an international
Yeah.
festival new? No, I mean there's the International Trumpet Guild, there's the International Trombone Association, there's IHS. You've got all of your. You can tell I'm a brass player because I didn't mention any of the woodwind ones, but they also have. Um, is it ICF, the International Clarinet Festival? I think. I know there's a saxophone one too because my involvement with Dennis Wick was also adjacent to um, Van Doren reeds and accessories. But I think it's all in context. Sure, there's been international festivals, and ITG is still an international festival that gets held pretty much in the US every single year. And they're slowly trying to add those sort of online components to them, but it's not
Mm.
it's not the focus. It's not what you guys are trying to accomplish with this festival, which is a truly, virtual international festival, which I suspect later on will have a physical component added to it, which is the other way around. It's the virtual first to connect literally the world, and then the physical next, so that, well, I mean, it's also nice to hear musicians live. So,
Yeah, we get the world to come in. Yeah.
right. So I think it's a great opportunity, and it's not a first in its concept of an international festival, but it's a first in context of what you're accomplishing by doing it and how you're approaching it. You know, it's hard to be first at anything.
True. Yeah.
But what it's not hard to do is how you approach it and how you bring it to market. I'm not the first person to sell student instruments, but I think we're one of the first that's really trying to create a program that's about ownership of a student instrument as opposed to renting, at least in the US for the last however many years. I mean, renting's been around forever. So
Definitely. Any closing thoughts, Andrew?
I think we've pretty much hit everything.
Yeah. So, thank you so much for joining us today, Richard.
that was my pleasure. It was great. I hope I didn't talk too much.
Oh no, it was great.
It was, yeah. I enjoyed listening to like this new perspective from a person who owns like a business but also has like the same sort of passion, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it,
So
it, it definitely gave me a new perspective.
I mean, we're out there. There's lots of good companies to work with, and you guys are finding them. So
yeah. Thank you so much. I think that's going to be the end of our podcast today. We talked about a bunch of what like Dennis Wick means and stuff about like their partnerships along with the partnership in LBN and what LBN is doing that coincides with DF Music's beliefs and values. So, yeah.
thanks for having me. Have a good
Oh,
one.
Mhm.
for sure. Thanks for joining.